Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Faith Focus Weekly Discipleship Podcast. My name is Kevin Rogness, and I'm the Discipleship Director here at Faith Covenant Church. And we're currently in the midst of a Lent series of episodes on the podcast. So please make sure that you're hitting the subscribe button, whether you're on YouTube or listening on any of the podcasting platforms, to make sure that you're not missing any episodes about Lent or future episodes to come. Like I said, we're in Lent now, and so today we're going to be talking about Lenten Sacrifice, which entails a lot of different things. Before we get too much into that, I do just want to read a quick definition of Lent. So Lent is a period of grief that necessarily ends with a great celebration of Easter. A more detailed definition is that this preparation can involve prayer, mortifying the flesh, which might involve fasting, abstinence, like kneeling positions in prayer, repentance of sins, almsgiving, simple living, and self-denial. And so Lenten Sacrifice definitely goes along with that. And so joining me today to talk about all of that is our very own Pastor Char. Pastor Char, thanks for coming and joining us.
Of course.
So I think you're on this series the most of anybody.
Really?
Other than me. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because I think we get you 3 times, because we already had you for Ash Wednesday.
Yeah.
We have you this, and then we're going to do one more.
Yeah.
So.
That was a surprise.
Yeah. Surprise. We have so many exciting, surprising things in store for you all. So, so I guess just to start off the conversation, what is Lenten Sacrifice?
Yeah. Well, it's not prescribed in Scripture that you're supposed to set this time before Easter apart, but it started very early on in the church. And the thought behind it is that in order to really fully embrace and appreciate the death and resurrection of Christ, we need to realize how necessary that was and how sinful we are. So if you don't have an understanding of your own sin and haven't spent some time sitting in that, then you don't have a full appreciation for what Christ did to save you from that sin. So the sacrifice piece then was, that piece was setting aside a period of time to reflect on ourselves and our sin and our weakness, and also to try and understand a wee bit of the sacrifice that Jesus went through by sacrificing something that we would miss.
Yep.
So it started as that way.
Yeah. So this is a much more common practice in like Catholicism or other Orthodox Christian traditions, but it's also in plenty of Protestant churches too. If you grew up in the church, your tradition may or may not have practiced it. Mine didn't. And so I just remember when I was like a kid in elementary school, a whole bunch of my friends and classmates would be like, "Oh, what are you giving up for Lent? What are you giving up for Lent?"
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm giving up pop, or I'm giving up candy or Nintendo or whatever."
Yeah.
So what are some of the examples that you have seen in your life of things that people sacrifice during Lent?
Yeah, a lot of things. A lot of it is, probably the majority is some type of food, or social media in recent years, a habit that maybe is a stumbling block for you that you wanted, I like smoking, or just something, scrolling an internet or watching a certain show or reading certain types of books or listening to certain music. Some people will fast from something like that or give up something like that. I did a devotion 2 years ago, I think, during Lent, that was about fasting from something every day. So it was 40 days of fasting, and it was fantastic. I can't think of the name of it right now, but we fasted from something very unique every day that you wouldn't even think of. Fasting from thinking about things this way, fasting from perseverating on this, fasting from judging about this. It was really powerful. So it's limitless, the number of things you can fast from.
Yeah. And of course the idea is to actually give up something that you actually have in your life on a consistent basis. For me, I don't eat a lot of candy anyways, and so to give up candy is not really a sacrifice for me. Or to give up pop, I don't drink pop either, that wouldn't be a sacrifice for me.
How are we friends?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because sugar and treats are one thing that Kirk and I
I
do
do like sugar.
Okay.
Like, it's just, I prefer it in the form of cinnamon rolls.
Okay.
Love cinnamon rolls.
Yeah.
So, I could give up cinnamon rolls for Lent, but actually I haven't had them. I don't have them very often.
Okay.
I should have them more often.
Yeah.
They're so good.
Yes.
But yeah, so it it does need to be something that is a consistent part of your life so that you really feel its absence.
Yes.
So,
and that's important, because if it's something that you won't miss and doesn't really matter to you anyway, then you're not.
then it's not a
Are
sacrifice.
you understanding sacrifice at all?
Right.
Are you? And even something that, like, some people give up caffeine for Lent, and you can get a caffeine headache, and you can really not feel well for a little while and have a deep craving for that. That you understand like this much of sacrifice, but still that can be something that can be a hurdle and a stumbling block in the morning when you just are not feeling well in the morning, you're not getting your caffeine. And then the goal is then that you stop and you go, oh, okay, really? This is tiny, and I'm going to pray through this, and I'm going to get through this, and I can do this.
This is just a tiny glimpse of what Jesus sacrificed for us. So you kind of already mentioned this, but is this required for Lent? So we've kind of said this before on previous episodes, and next week I'll talk to Sarah about this more on our episode about 40 days. But this is just part of an invitation to help us process more of what Easter is about and that sort of thing. So it's never in the Bible like you have to give up something for 40 days. And we'll actually talk about this next week, but it's 46 days because Sundays are not included. So in theory, depending on how you think about it, some traditions would say you can engage in this thing that you're sacrificing on Sundays, because Sunday is meant to be a day of celebration. So different traditions view that differently. So just be advised of that. So what were some of the discussions of Lent that you had growing up, or Lenten Sacrifice? Was that something that was common in your tradition?
Well, I grew up in the ELCA Lutheran Church, actually before it was the ELCA. I can't remember which branch before, but and we celebrated Lent or acknowledged Lent in our church my whole life. And what that meant was we went to church on Wednesdays and we had soup suppers, and then some kind of a teaching or service that I don't really remember. But I don't remember. And I was a child, so I perhaps just don't remember. I don't remember conversation about sacrifice, and I don't remember that in my home at all. It was the addition of a midweek something for us.
And so as you've gone on and learned more, how often or have you practiced Lenten Sacrifice, and what have you done with that?
Interesting. I've done actually more of the adding piece that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit than the sacrifice piece. Kirk and I, for the first time together.
Well, let's actually just jump straight to that then, because some people will say, in addition to or instead of a Lenten sacrifice, we'll maybe add something. So that may be a practice of prayer or a practice of doing something. So what is your experience of that then?
I often will have a devotional that's around the topic of Lent that I'll do during the Lenten season. So adding to my regular quiet time some devotion that specifically gets me thinking about my sinful nature, or invites me to think differently, or to sacrifice, like the one I did a couple years ago. Sacrificing from something every day was very deeply thoughtful and moving in my life. So the addition, a few years ago, I wrote a handwritten thank you note to somebody who was meaningful in my life, and just sent out 40 of them, or 46 probably, every day during Lent. I sent a thank you note to somebody, and that was beautiful. It was a beautiful process for me to say, wow, God has really blessed me, and I have 46 people that I can say thank you for the part you played in my life. So it's been a devotion or a type of prayer. This year I'm starting my days with 20 minutes of doing a centering prayer, and we can talk about that on another podcast, maybe different types of prayer. So I'm adding a different form of prayer that's deeply meaningful in my daily rhythm, and I'm fasting from Facebook this year, and Kirk and I from all sweets. So check in with us day before Easter.
So I shouldn't dangle chocolate in front of you.
No, please don't.
I don't have any in here anymore at the moment, but
but there's tons of resources available: reading plans, devotional thoughts. You name it. The internet's got an endless supply of options.
Well, many of us right now are also during Lent. We've been encouraged to go through the book, pray through the Word for your church. So I'm doing that. I know I think we bought 50 copies, and I think we sold out.
Yep.
So there's at least 50 people or families in our church that are doing that, which is great. And it's not too late to start that as well. So now we have these ideas of both Lenten Sacrifice or Lenten Addition to kind of either take something away to remind us of what Christ did for us, or to add something as an additional spiritual discipline to help us just orient ourselves towards God.
Yeah.
So at this point now, at the time that we air this episode, we'll be like 2 weeks-ish into Lent. If we haven't started a Lenten sacrifice or a Lenten addition of some sort, is it too late? No. Is it not worth doing at this point?
It is not too late. And in fact, you don't even have to just do this during Lent.
That's true.
Newsflash.
That's true.
Anytime we offer something to the Lord and lay something down at His feet and say, I don't want this anymore, I want to give this to you, offer this to you, or I'm going to add something so I can draw closer to you. Anytime we do that, it's fabulous. The goal isn't the sacrifice. That's not the goal.
Right.
And the goal isn't the 40 days or the 46 days. That's not the goal. The goal is to be mindful of who we are and who God is, and to be mindful of the sacrifice that was made and our need for it.
Yeah.
We stood in desperate need. We stand in desperate need of that, and we don't think about that. Easter comes and we come to a service and we get new dresses and the Easter bunny brings chocolate or whatever you do in your home. And we can focus on that day and on the celebration, which is fantastic and good and right to celebrate on the celebration piece. But the celebration is a fraction as meaningful if you just do the celebration.
Right.
If you don't have the darkness before, then the celebration is fun, but it doesn't hold the meaning that it otherwise holds.
Yeah.
So it's the full story. Easter weekend is not Easter Sunday, it's Easter weekend. It's a holy weekend. It's Friday night with the crucifixion and just the heaviness of that. And then it's Holy Saturday, where the disciples did not know that Easter morning was coming.
Right.
They did not know that. Like,
they
life
should
was,
have.
right. But they didn't. They sat with this grief and going, well, now what? And all of our hopes and all of our dreams. And then Easter morning came. So for them,
surprise.
Hallelujah. It was amazing. So to try and capture a bit of that and really feel it.
Yeah. So I mean, again, like we said, this is something that you can do during Lent, but it's also something you can do year-round. The same principles apply. It's something to just it's an invitation to orient ourselves towards God in a different way that maybe we didn't in previous times. What are some of the insights that you would say you have gained throughout the years of either a sacrifice or an addition? What are some things that what are some insights that you've gained from that, or things that you've appreciated?
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to grow deeper to the Lord. And as we get closer to God, the deeper we want to go and the more depth we realize. I mean, we just want to get closer and God gets bigger the closer we get to Him. And it's just so meaningful. You deepen that relationship and you think, how could it be even better? And how could I go closer? And then you try something different. And that brings you to another part of God, His character and God's nature. And then you try a different thing and that shows you another piece of God's character and nature. And then you abstain from this and you have to dig deeper within yourself. And everything we do just is depth upon depth upon depth.
Yeah.
And it's unfathomable. We'll never, but God gets bigger every time we draw near.
When I think too, when we sacrifice something, we maybe realize how big we've allowed other things to become.
Yes.
So like last year, I gave up Facebook for Lent, which was wonderful. I suddenly realized how much time I had.
Yeah.
I was like, I can go do all these other things. Like, and not that every single thing I filled my time with after cutting out Facebook was necessarily a holy use of time. I just found other ways to waste some of the time. But still, it just kind of made me realize, I put way too much time into this. This is not healthy. Yeah. This is weird.
Yeah.
And so it was really nice. And so for a while, that really helped curtail my Facebook usage. So, I mean, sometimes we can figure out, like you said, how big God is. And sometimes we can also figure out how big we've made other things in place of God.
Absolutely.
So there's so much that can be gained from this practice. Again, not an essential practice, not something that the Bible tells us to do, but something that is consistent with biblical teachings and just helps us orient ourselves towards God. So, are there any last thoughts that you have about Lenten Sacrifice? Or?
Can I share one verse?
Yes, absolutely. You can share more than one verse if you really want to.
Matthew 9:13.
Okay.
Just one verse. The New International Version. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. I think of that often during Lent too, that the goal isn't sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice.
Right.
If we're fasting from Facebook and not being merciful and loving to our neighbor, then we're not in the right place.
Yeah.
You know, God has not come to call the righteous but sinners. So if we don't realize that we're sinners, we're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
The starting point's not even on the right page. So it's that acknowledgement that we're sinners and the being merciful as God is merciful. And that's where the sacrifice stems from.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Char. We really appreciate your insights, and thank you all for joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening. We just really appreciate you taking the time to engage in these topics. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, my email address is in the episode notes, and you can contact me in that way. So we hope you have a wonderful and blessed day.
Bye.